All right. E- Even my transition to myself this morning was behind. So, good morning. Happy Saturday for many of you who are in this hemisphere, and those of you in a different hemisphere, happy evening. It's good to see everybody here. Jumping on the live stream. Wow, already up to 6 viewers. That's awesome. So welcome, and again, apologize. Mel was giving me a hard time because I forgot to post in the Discord channel, and I didn't post. I don't think I posted on the YouTube channel or LinkedIn or anything. So I kind of got up a little bit late this morning. My son works nights on the weekends, and so he got in. He's not quite 18, so I still like to stay up and be available and awake when he's um, coming home, driving home. Um, so he gets home pretty late on Fridays and Saturdays. So it's a little bit of a pain getting up in the morning, and then we had storms last night. So there's all my excuses. So all my excuses for running late today and not posting and reminding people. But that's what YouTube's for, right? Isn't YouTube supposed to just let you know when I go live? And besides, it's on all of my videos. I go live every Saturday from 10 a.m. Central Time. So, I mean, really, am I really the one to blame here? No, I'm just kidding. So, uh, thank you all for jumping on here and remembering on your own that we are here generally every Saturday from 10 a.m. typically till noon. Again, the first hour is usually going to be dedicated right now. First hour is dedicated to our DeepPockets project, which is a community project that we're building together to give you the opportunity to kind of work as a team and to work under a lead developer, which would be me, and give you the opportunity to kind of work on a real project that I'm actually hoping to use as the client, but give you the opportunity to work on a real project um, that will help you get that experience that you might not get otherwise. And are there other ways to do that? Absolutely. This is not the only way. It may not even be the best way, but it's a way that I came up with to try to help you guys in your development journey get used to and be a part of really what it's going to be more like in the real world working environment. So that's what we're doing here in the first hour. The second hour typically is not a full hour because I tend to go long in the first hour, especially with these intros. And then after that, we'll do kind of a Q&A section. I might have some things that I want to talk about, or if you guys have any questions, we'll jump over those. Which, speaking of which, if you have questions as we are going through, whether it's the first hour, second hour, it doesn't matter. But as you have questions, either put them in the chat, put some question marks in front of them, or use like @DevMentorDave, because it'll pop up with a little like red box around my name, and that will let me know that somebody's trying to get a hold of me. So use one of those two methods. That's the easiest way. I try to keep up with the chat, but while I'm talking, it's hard for me to do two things at once, talk and read. So while I'm talking, I'm probably not going to see your messages here if you're typing something in the chat. So make sure you use one of those two methods to try to catch my eye as I go through, because I know sometimes there's a lot of discussion in the chat. Sometimes it's dry and it's easy to find. Sometimes it's really hopping in the chat, and it's a little bit more difficult for me to keep up with along the way. So if you are watching live, jump in the chat, say hello, as some already are. If this is the first time you've been on Dev Mentor Dave live stream, let us know where you're watching from. I generally recognize most people that are in here, but if I call you out and you've been here before, I apologize. I can't remember everybody, but hopefully I remember pretty much everybody that's here that's been here before. So say hello. Let me know that you're watching live. I can see the numbers. If you wonder why I look over to the left, it's because I'm looking at the stream to make sure that the connection's good, and I'm just out of curiosity, vain curiosity, to see how many people are actually here. So if you're watching live, I would appreciate it if you click the like button. Just lets YouTube know, hey, people are finding this interesting and helpful, and they're at least doing what the person asked them to do. So if you don't find it helpful or you don't like it at all, you can always do the thumbs down, whatever. But anyway, thank you for jumping on here and watching live with me. Please, 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 please feel free to ask questions in the chat, to communicate in the chat. The whole point of this is not for me to just sit here and talk for 2 hours. I mean, I will, but the point really is to try to be as helpful as possible through this process. And so I want to make sure that I'm getting your questions, and that you guys are interacting as a community, because at the end of the day, the Dev Venture Dave YouTube channel is not about me. I'm kind of the main focus of it on the YouTube channel, but the goal is to funnel everybody down to the Discord channel for now, and help build this community that we're building of junior and mid-level and senior level devs. In fact, it's been interesting watching some of the banter back and forth recently over different things. So I do want to encourage you, keep that up, keep that communication up, helping one another. Especially, I know there's been a lot of people that have come in to the Discord channel asking questions, and they've gotten help pretty quickly. And so I would just encourage you to keep doing that. Obviously, everybody comes to this with different appearances. Well, that too, with different opinions and with different experiences. And so there's going to be times where we disagree on things, and that's okay. As I've said from the beginning, there's no perfect or one right way to do everything, especially when it comes to development. So feel free to disagree, but do it respectfully. And you guys have done a great job of that so far. So, all right, let me jump in here and just see. We've got Mel and Ming. Good to see you, Ming. O'Neill. If I remember, O'Neill, you're from the UK, right? Let me know. And then Ian. Welcome, Ian. Ray, welcome. Brendan's got a question. What will be our front-end tool? If you're talking about JavaScript framework, we're going to be using React, but we're going to be using it inside Laravel. So we will not be using Next.js. We will not be using it as its own SPA, its own separate repository or anything like that. It's going to be inside the Laravel project, which might be new for a lot of you who have used React before. But this is one of the things that we tend to do at the company that I work for if we're just spinning something up on our own as a brand new project. We don't always do it this way, but this is kind of the way that we tend to do it. So I want to introduce that way to you. So it'll be fun. We are not going to use inertia, but we will use APIs. So we're going to use the basic Laravel routing, which inertia sort of uses. It's kind of weird though. I'm not a huge fan of inertia. Maybe I need to play with it more to get more used to it, but I think it adds complexity I don't necessarily think needs to be there. So you'll see. I have not put React into the what's it called? Repo. I've not put React into the repository yet. So I'm still playing around with that to see exactly how I want to do it. But I think it will be different than you guys are probably used to, just for fun, just to give you one more thing to learn. That's the whole point of the project in the first place. So, and we'll see. Maybe it'll crash and burn. I don't know. I'm not a huge React fan. That was voted on by the community. So, my preference would be Vue, and we do this with Vue all the time. So I know it works with Vue. We'll see if it works with React. So, and if it doesn't work with React, that's just one more way that you know that Vue is superior to React. Yeah, I'm going to see. CW says we require inertia in order for Laravel to serve the React framework. Yeah, I don't think it has to be done that way. I'm going to try not to do it that way, but we'll see. Yeah, and we won't get there probably for a couple weeks, Renan. Let's see. I would probably follow whatever docs you can find on it. Which means probably going the inertia route, honestly, on the Laravel documentation. So, um, not that inertia is bad. It's not my preference. Um, okay, so let's talk about pull requests. So several of you submitted pull requests, and actually, sorry, before we jump into that, um, some of you, I know, we're having trouble setting up environments. It sounds like, or looks like, maybe that's not as big of a problem anymore. I know several people were helping, giving different ideas using Herd and DB Engine, excuse me, or using like just a XAMPP or something like that. Those those are great options. Obviously, I'm using Sail with Docker. Um, so it's totally up to you what route you want to go. If you still need help, let us know in the Discord channel. I'm not going to try to do it today. I didn't really get anybody saying that they needed it. It seemed like still, so I'm not going to try to go over that today. If we still need help, I can still maybe do another video or live stream and go through several options. Something excuse me, something to keep in mind again is I'm on a Mac. A lot of you are on PC, so that's going to make a little bit of a difference. But hopefully, most of you, especially if you're wanting to participate in the code, hopefully you've got the project up and running locally on your computer. If you are wanting to work on the project and you're having trouble with that, let us know, because I don't want you to get lost. I don't want you to get really far behind simply because you couldn't get your environment set up. So please let us know. We're here to help you. We're here to make sure that you get things set up and learn what you need to learn. Maybe this is just something new that you need to learn, since PHP is probably new to you. So running a lamp stack might be new to you, especially if you've gone through a mostly front end heavy boot camp or training course or something like that. So definitely reach out. I want to make sure as many people as possible can participate in writing code. And the easiest way to do that is to make sure that you have an environment running, and you can actually test it and things like that. So we are going to dive in now to some PRs. I'm going to switch screens here. Boop, boop, boop. If I can find my buttons. There we go. Okay. So this is our project. If you remember, we made a few little alterations to things last week when I was just kind of showing you through the application. Maybe it was the week. Was it the week before? I don't remember. It all runs together now. But I made a few changes here. We made this little text change where it says Dave was here. If I can go back to it, there we go. And you'll notice I'm just running this from localhost. So again, we made some changes to some routing. We made some changes to this view, to this blade template. And so we're not going to really focus too much on that again right now. We'll get into more of the routing stuff. I showed you some concepts, but we'll talk about routing more as we begin to start actually building out pages and things like that. So today I want to look at several PRs that were put up and kind of walk through the pull request review process. Say that 3 times fast. The pull request review process. Hang on one second. I have to have branding, so just, let's see. Paste. Boom. It's not going to work very well in these backgrounds here. Oh well. I just noticed that the screen view doesn't have my overlay at the bottom. You gotta brand. Like Mel told me, I'm a YouTuber now. I have to self promote, right? So there we go. Okay, so we're going to look at these PR reviews, and the main thing that I want to do is kind of walk through my process of reviewing these PRs so that you guys can see how I do it. And obviously I'm going to do it on the live stream, right? So you're going to see how I do it, but I want to walk through it so that you guys can also kind of go through the same procedure and see how I would like you to interact with each other. Because usually what happens or what we want to have happen, is the team helps review each other's code. Sometimes if you got a small team, you might just have a lead developer who reviews all the PRs and even merges all the PRs. It kind of depends on the company and how much structure, how much they want to enforce a specific coding style, things like that. So, but in most of the teams that I've been on, usually everyone reviews everybody else's PRs. So pull request is a PR in case anybody's confused. So everybody kind of reviews each other's PRs. Sometimes they have it set up to where it requires at least one approval to be merged into the main branch. Sometimes it requires two approvals. Kind of depends on again on the company and on their requirements. So we're gonna go with one approval before we merge it in. So I don't have any rules set up for this, so we'll just do it on the honor system for now until I sit down and figure out the rules. Because again, GitHub's kind of new to me. I've been more of a Bitbucket person most of my development career. So we'll do one approval means that it can be merged. All right, but I want to go through the actual process and show you as you are doing reviews of other people's code, how I want you to go about doing that, because sometimes people can be very fearful of PR reviews because either they've had a bad experience in the past where somebody didn't do it in maybe the best way, or a good way, I should say, and or maybe they're just afraid that somebody's going to just rip their code apart and they're going to have to rewrite everything. And honestly, that's not a bad thing. You know, it's not a bad thing for you to have somebody kind of tear into your code, especially if they're doing it in a kind way, because that's one of the best ways that there is to learn what you're doing wrong or what you're doing that's not part of the company's requirements from a code standpoint. So don't take PR reviews personally. All right. Consider that the person making the PR review, typically they're going to be a lead or a senior developer, especially if you're a junior developer, but assume that their goal is twofold. One, to protect the code base. All right. So their goal is to protect the code base from you putting code in that's going to be a harm initially or further down the line. And then two, that they're trying to help you learn and grow in your journey as a developer. Are there times that people just are mean and vindictive? Sure, because we're humans and we're fallen, and we do things for our own pleasure, even if it hurts other people sometimes. So I'm not saying that doesn't happen. What I'm saying is assume the best. Assume that person that's reviewing your PR doesn't have an axe to grind against you. Assume that they are simply trying to uphold the standards of the company, protect the code base, and help you grow in your knowledge and your experience along the way. Most of the time, when I've had rough PR reviews, that was the reason. Now, have I had some that I think were probably driven by other motives? Absolutely. So it does happen. But I want you to get used to assuming the best about whoever is doing the PR review. And when you do that, it will be much easier for you to find the areas that you need to grow in and that you need to learn in. If you just assume that they're being mean, you won't listen to the advice. All right. So listen to the advice, take it, and see how you can make yourself better as a developer, not just for yourself, but even for the company that you end up working for along the way. So, all right, we've got several things going on here. Ray, was I supposed to make those alterations? Nope. Don't touch it. I want to look at it live, so you're good. Yeah, I'm not going to be harsh. The feeling of impending doom is growing. That's awesome. I think most of you know me well enough to know that I'm not going to be a jerk about it. I might jokingly say something, but I won't mean it for real. Awesome. Okay. So let's dive into some PRs. We actually only have a few. before I do this again, I keep putting it off. Before I do this, if just because you don't have a PR up for this specific ticket yet, one does not mean that you can't put PRs up in the future. Two, it doesn't mean that you can't put up your own PR for this ticket in the future. All right, so let's look at the ticket. If I can find it. Here we go. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, so here's our ticket. Community ticket number 1, create database migrations. So generally what will happen, like in my company, is we'll have somebody will do the work. They'll hopefully test it. And depending on the project, if the client's letting us, we'll write unit tests for it, right? And so usually we'll do all the work that's necessary for coding, and we'll push that up to the repository in our branch. Then we'll create a pull request. All right, and that pull request typically will use the ticket number or some sort of reference, depending on how we're getting the work, to what that PR is for in the title, so that I can go to the title and look at it and be like, okay, I know that that's for ticket number 1. All right, so let's take a look here. Oh, go back. Ugh, that's annoying. I do not like GitHub. All right, so for example, this one would be a little bit hard to know what I'm reviewing without opening it up. All right, see, there you go, Ray. There's criticism for you. So I would prefer that this not be the title. Now, the branch name, so let me just look at, if you can see this right here. Let me pull this up. Make this a little bit bigger. Okay. So I don't know if you can see the branch name. So the branch name is more in keeping with the branch. I didn't give any instructions for the PR, so this is totally new information. So if you felt like you did something wrong, you didn't. I didn't tell you what to do. All right. So, but the branch looks correct. So the branch name is Ray Branch 1, and then there's some information about what it was that he was doing here, right? Community ticket 1, create DB migration. So if I were just looking at the branch, oh, thank you guys. Boom. All right, so let's try this again. I forgot that I switched back over. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. So here we have, it should be updated now. Let me know. Give it 5 seconds, and if it doesn't update, let me know. It's showing updated on my other screen here. Okay. All right, so this is what I was talking about. So right here, this is the title of the PR, and this doesn't really tell me anything if I'm looking at the list, right? So this, what I'd like to do is be able to see what it is that I'm going to review before I review it. So a lot of times what I'll do is just copy my branch name into there, or something like ticket number 1 or something like that. But like the branch name is great. That's right in line with what we were talking about as far as the branch name specifically. I didn't give you any instructions on the PR name, but just so you know, moving forward, it would be helpful to do something like ticket number 1, community, create DB migrations, or something that tells me what it is, what ticket number, or what it is that you were actually working on. So yeah, Mel says GitHub's weird. I tried to rename my PR the first time and it didn't go up, but at the same time it did. Yeah, that's weird. Again, I'm not a huge fan of GitHub, but I know everybody uses it. So I might create a PR here just to see. All right. Okay. So just a couple of notes there on the title, but the branch looks great. But titles would be a little bit easier to see what it is before I get there. Okay, so let's say I know that this is ticket number 1. I'm going to open up the actual ticket. All right. Now, I should know what these tickets say because I'm the one that created them. So theoretically, that should not be a problem. But if you're reviewing someone else's code, especially if we are, when we get to the point where everybody has separate tickets, you're not all going to be working on the same thing all the time. So you definitely want to make sure that you open the ticket and that you read through the ticket so that you understand what the requirements are for that PR review. It's not enough to just look at the code and say, that looks like good code, right? You need to make sure that it's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing, okay? So we look at the ticket and we see this create database migrations. Says please create migration file for each of the database tables. And again, you want to make sure that you understand the requirements. So it says please create a migration file for each of the following database tables. All right. So I know, looking at this ticket, that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the PR should have 8 migration files. All right. So we should have 8 files in this. Now, that doesn't mean it should only have 8 files, because it may be that you need to run an extra migration afterwards for adding a foreign key or something like that that couldn't be done before. You know, there may be reasons why 8 may not be the total number, but it should be at least 8, right? Because we know that we've got, 8 tables, and we're supposed to have 1 for each one, right? So I'm going to move this. That thing keeps popping over my head and it's making me silly. Let's see. I'm going to move whoop, not that. Up here to the top. I don't think that'll be in the way. Okay. So then it says make sure any relationships use foreign keys. So I'm going to be looking for some sort of setup for foreign keys between some of these tables. And then it gives you the branch name, structure, which we already looked at. Here's some documentation about migration. So I would pull up the migration documentation myself just to make sure I have a better understanding. If I see something I don't understand or don't recognize, I might jump over the documentation, take a look at that. And then we've got the database schema, right? So jumping into a pull request review, it's not just a matter of reading code, okay? And I want to make that clear. A lot of times we get to where we want to move quickly, and so we either don't look at the ticket, or we don't pull it down and test it, or we just kind of read through the code and say, yeah, it looks good to me, right? In fact, I cannot tell you how many PRs I've looked at where somebody reviewed it and the response was LTGM, right? Or LGTM, looks good to me, right? And that may be the correct response, because you might do all of this and run through it, and that's great. And it works perfectly fine, and the code looks good. And at the end of the day, I'm not saying that LGTM is the wrong thing to say, or that you should never use that. The problem is, a lot of times, typically when you see that, more than likely somebody is not really doing a great PR review. All right. So here we've got the ticket. We've read through the ticket. We know generally what we're trying to do. So I will reference this as we go through it. Okay. So let's go back to our pull requests. I think I want to start with this one from guided. All right. So again, this is okay. It tells me what the number is. Maybe a little bit more info, like database migrations or something like that, just to kind of let me know ahead of time what it is I'm going to be looking at as I look at the PRs. Yeah. You're right, Mel. But that's okay. I want to talk through it, all right? So, because this is a good learning experience for everybody, all right? This is why we've done things the way that we've done them. Okay. So, we've got this pull request, a pull request. And we see there's lots of commits on this. That's great. The main thing that we're worried about are the file changes. Now, something might pique my interest right away when I look at this PR review or look at this pull request. Man, I'm gonna say that all wrong a lot of times today. You know what I'm talking about. All right. So when I look at this PR, there's something that initially jumps out at me that says, something may not be right here. Somebody tell me. Anybody know? Let me throw it out to you guys in the chat. Anybody know what might be catching my eye? I'm going to take a few drinks here to be able to keep talking. There's nothing like coffee. Nobody? Nobody knows? That's an interesting one, Ray. The original migrations are missing. Okay. I hadn't even gotten that far yet. I'm just looking at this screen right here. Any other thoughts? Yeah, we already talked about the title. All right, let me show you here. So I don't know. I need to look into and see if there's like a something I can use to like draw on my own screen. That would be interesting. Anyway, I'll look into that. So this is really what I'm looking at right here. So one of the first things that I look at with a PR is like how many files have changed. One, because that may mean it's going to be a longer PR to look at, and if I have a little bit of time, I might choose a different PR that has fewer files to look at, fewer things to check. But especially this piques my interest because of the ticket, right? So again, we were looking at the ticket and we saw, okay, we've got 8 migrations, and so generally probably going to be 8 files, maybe 10 files, or somewhere around there, right? Mel says Ray also complained about that. All right, so when we go back and look at this, we've got 26 files. That's a lot of files for the ticket that is there. So either that means that I don't know what is necessary to complete this ticket, right? So that's an actual possibility, especially if I didn't write the ticket. If I'm new to the project, I may not know that it may need 26 files to do what the ticket says. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. It will be, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. So that I can't just say, well, just because it has lots of files, it's bad. It's wrong. But 26, at least to my mind, seems like there might be something, not that I'm missing, but maybe that the developer missed. So this might be an opportunity for me to interact with the other dev and say, hey, I think you misunderstood what was going on with the ticket here. All right, now the main reason why there are so many files is because there are a lot of migrations. Let's see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So 20 of those 26 files are migrations. All right. And so we're going to take a look here and say, okay, why is that? Why is it that we have so many migrations? So let's just pop in to one of them, because again, I want to see, is this something that I've missed, or is it something that the developer either didn't understand or needs to be corrected on, or something like that, right? Okay, so let's take a look at this first migration. And when I look at this first migration, I see what seems to be correct. This I would maybe leave a comment here and say, hey, let's not leave commented code in the repository as much as possible. Generally, so we had this conversation. Actually, I think this was a private conversation that I had with somebody. But generally, I prefer few to no comments in the code base. Some of this is boilerplate, and I typically leave the boilerplate comments just because it's a pain to take them out. But generally speaking, you should be writing code that is readable. All right. So even if it's even if it's too big, even if it has room for improvement, you should be writing code that is easy to follow, easy to read. This is one of the reasons I'm not a huge fan of abstracting everything, in case anybody knows about that and cares about that and thinks about that. Um, Sometimes abstraction can create more problems than it can be helpful, especially when you're reading through the code. If I have to jump around from file to file to file to figure out what is going on in this function, that's not a well-written function. All right. So I want to write the code in a way that makes sense, that works, but is easy to read and understand. Because if it's easy to read and understand, then somebody doesn't need a block of information about what this function does. They can read the function and see what it does. Another thing is naming the function in a way that is easy to understand what that function does. I think this, if I remember correctly, I think this kind of goes back to some of the clean code concepts. I'm not I'm not a huge fan of saying any one person's ideas are perfectly correct, but I do agree with that philosophy personally. Oh yeah, it was Ray. That's right. Yes, we were. He had comments like on almost every line, which again, that's sometimes in his defense. Um, Especially when you're starting out with something new. I know Laravel is new for him, so he had comments probably more to help him than necessarily to help somebody else. So I'm fine with like comments in your commits, but when you go to create the PR, I would suggest that you remove any comments that you have that are not absolutely necessary. Now, are there times where here, I'm going to switch over here just because here we go. Now, since I'm talking a lot, are there times where, just remind me to switch back because I probably will forget. Um, are there times where comments in code can and should be left? Absolutely. There are just realities that you're going to write some pieces of code that are hard to understand or that are complex, or that maybe there's something that the average dev has not run into before, and in that case, leaving a comment is good and helpful. But most of the comments that we tend to leave are not good comments. The other ones that I would probably leave in there would be any to-do comments. So if you want to leave like a to-do message either for yourself or for somebody else in the future, knowing, hey, we're doing it this way, but we're going to want to do something else in the future or fix something else in the future. That's okay. But again, if you do that, if you make that change, if you make that fix, make sure you remove that to do, because those comments tend to get stale in the code. If people don't update them, if they don't keep them fresh, if they don't remove them when they're no longer necessary. So that would be my encouragement on the commenting situation. So even more so than that, like I can put up with comments that are information, but when it comes to commenting out code, we are in a repository, which means we have a history. So if you delete something and push it up, we can always go back and find it again. That's the beauty of Git, right? That's the beauty of these repositories. So don't be afraid to get rid of commented code. If it was commented before, if it was there before, then it'll still be there in the history and we can always go back and find it. Okay? So especially code, don't leave commented code, but I prefer that you not leave any comments that you've created generally most of the time. All right? Let's see. Yeah, Ian, that's a good point, especially for this. And again, this is boilerplate, so I don't necessarily um, worry about removing boilerplate um, comments, but it does. This does give you information about very generic functions here, up and down, right? So it's helpful to have something like that if you're writing generic methods. So hopefully you're not writing very many generic methods, but obviously using migrations, this is the way that you do it. So that's good. All right, so back to our original question, 26 files. This migration looks pretty good. I'm just going to real fast jump over to the schema. We're looking at the budgets table. So we have ID, name, year, month, and it's index, text, integer, integer. ID, name, year, month. Boom, 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 boom. Very good. Um, I would use string here, just because I normally have. I don't remember off the top of my head what the difference is. So this might be something that I would go through and look up. Uh, do, 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 do. Let's see. Text. Oh, it's right next to string. That's helpful. It creates a varchar. Text method creates a text equivalent column. Let's see. Generally, I would use string. I don't think I've honestly ever used text. So that might be a comment that I would leave, that I would use text. I'm not going to comment on this PR though, because it's one of two. So, but yeah. So if I see something again that I don't recognize or I don't know very well, I'm going to jump over to the documentation, take a look at it, and just make sure text looks like it might be a perfectly fine thing to use. So maybe I wouldn't comment on it. I'd just be like, oh, well, that's something I haven't done before, and move on. All right. So let's jump back over here. So this looks good. We've got our down function, drop if exists budgets. All right. So this was probably added by the make library for Laravel. So this looks good. I would tell them to remove this, but that looks fine. Okay. So what else is going on here? We've got lots of these. This one, that's misspelled. So that's something to keep in mind too. So we've got a misspelled category, and it's interesting. This is not going to work too. So I would leave a comment here as well. Budget categories is not going to be deleted because it's spelled differently from here to here. All right. So I would probably leave a comment on this one. Hey, budget categories is misspelled, right? And then remove this, right? Let's see. But that's still not telling me what's going on here. So let me just look at some more of these pretty quickly. What is the deal? Accounts, balances, transaction. Wait a minute. Oh, this is annoying. I can't make this screen bigger to see these. Blech. Here we go. Okay. So we've got a transactions table here. And then we've got another transactions table down here. Oh, I see what's happening. Okay, so we're creating the foreign keys in a separate migration. All right, so two things here. One, we want to add a drop for the foreign key in this one. I think there might be another transactions. Let me see if I can find it. Huh. Drop transactions. Okay, and this is another one that's just dropping the transactions table, which we don't need that because we already have it in the first one up here, right? So as I'm looking at this, I'm starting to see kind of the issue, right? I'm seeing that we've got code that either already exists in one place and it's duplicated someplace else, or that's all right, Mel. Or I'm seeing that maybe there's needs to be an alteration in the process and the way that these are created. So something to think about when it comes to migrations, especially, is you want to think through, just so you don't have as many files. You want to think through the order in which you should make your migrations, because what you want to do is try to add the foreign keys to your table when you create it, if possible. Now, if you're trying to add a foreign key to a table that doesn't exist yet, remember these migrations get run in order. So if you're trying to add a foreign key to a table that doesn't exist, it's going to throw an error. So you want to think through, what order should I create things in? And that's where, something like this database structure can help, right? So if you look at something like the transactions table here, So the transactions table, we see this has the most connections of any of the tables. And so that means this is probably going to be the last transaction, the last migration that we want to create, because we've got lots of foreign keys linking to lots of other tables. So transactions should probably be one of, if not the last table that we want to create. Now, if we pull back out, if we pull back out here and look at some of these other tables, I would look at like budgets. Basically, only has outbound. It's not pulling anything in. It's outbound. It's being pulled in by other tables, right? Budget categories is being pulled in by other tables. Accounts pulled in by other tables. Bills pulled in by other tables. So I would probably recommend that you start off with those 4 migrations first, because those tables are not dependent on anything else, but other tables depend on them. All right, so if you start with your first dependency tables, for lack of a better term, then it's going to be easier for you to get everything that you need in your other tables. All right, so let's see. So I would do those 4 tables. Then maybe I would do monthly bills, and then balances, and then budget line items, or those 3 at least would be my second level, and then transactions would be the last one. And what you do by that is you pretty much, if I'm seeing everything correctly, you should be able to do that in just 8 migrations, because you have all the order of tables being created in such a way that the dependencies are already there. So that's something to think about when you're writing your migrations in the future, if you do Laravel work or other migrations. Something to think about. You can do everything that you need to in one place, instead of having to go through and build kind of all of these extra files. So in this instance, here's what I would typically do, because this is going to take a lot of rework, because this is going to really probably necessitate that I sit down and talk to you and walk through some of these things with you. I probably would just do something like this. I would do review changes, request changes. Well, if I can do, here we go. Come on. Caps lock off. Okay, let's. All right, so I'd probably do something like this. Let's talk through this offline. I'm going to request changes. I'm not going to approve anything, right? So I'll submit that review. There we go. So now you'll get a notification that says, hey, we need to talk. But here's why I do it that way. All right, because one, it would be a lot of information to try to put into a comment. Rather than going through and leaving comments on all the different files, that's very time consuming when I can sit down with somebody and have a conversation. The second reason why I would do it that way is that allows me to not write something that sounds like I'm just being a jerk, right? Now, sometimes if it's just a quick thing that needs to be changed, we'll put that in, right? We'll talk through that. But I want to be sensitive as a reviewer that I don't want somebody to think that I'm just destroying their PR. So if there's big changes that need to happen, I want to go in and I want to actually, I want to, show them that it's not correct. So I'm not going to approve it. I'm going to request changes, but I'm going to have that conversation with them offline, or if we're in different places online, but not on the PR. Sometimes what will happen, especially if there's strong opinions, what can happen is you can get into an argument in Git, in the GitHub, and that's not good. Especially if you are working for like an agency or something like that, and you have clients, and especially if you are going to turn over the code base to them. Not that clients necessarily are going to go through and read old PRs, but you never know. Somebody might wonder what happened. Why was this change made? in the code base, and um, they may end up on that PR from one place or another. And if there's this back and forth, that just doesn't look good for your company, for there to have that kind of infighting, so to speak. So if there's a big change or maybe a controversial change, maybe I leave a comment and someone's like asking me a question, I might ignore the question in the code review, and I'll just get with them offline, because I want to handle those conversations personally and privately if possible, unless there needs to be something that gets information that gets disseminated to the team. I want to handle any large changes or anything that I can train you or coach you up on. I want to do that in person as much as possible, because that's going to help you more than me just leaving some cold comments on a PR review. All right, let's see. I'm not seeing any errors so far on my end for those of you that have uh, are having a problem with the stream. Okay, so let's see. When you make a table, should you create all the columns even if they don't yet link to anything? Um, Let me see here. Even if they don't yet link to anything. So should you create a column without setting it up initially as a foreign key? Sometimes that happens, especially if you're developing your schema on the fly. That will happen sometimes. So sometimes it just happens and you can't avoid it. I would recommend taking the time to go through your schema and see what those dependency tables are, and try to do it so that you don't have to do that. Sometimes you have to do that, but if you are building a table and it has a foreign key relationship, and you don't have that other table built yet, to me that should be a warning sign that I need to create this other table first. And remember, when you're in your code base, let me pull up the code base real quick here. So when you're in here and you're looking at your code, you've got these migrations. You can always rename the migration. If you create your dependency table after you've created your current table, and you've got, let's say you're working on uh, adding those foreign keys. Sorry, the mine started going spinning, so I'm just wondering if maybe there is some issue. It's not telling me there's issues, but that's okay. All right. So if you are using the Laravel make function, and it's automatically creating these files for you, you can always go back and rename one if you've created one after when it needs to run in the process. So that's what I would say is if you find yourself in that situation where you're putting a column into a table and it really should be linked to something that doesn't exist yet, go create what it exists, go create what it's pointing to, and just rename the file so that it runs before the whatever is dependent upon it. So you that's all that's happening with those files. They just run in the number, and as you can see, unless you're literally doing them milliseconds after each other, you can rename the number. Just change the number at the end. Like you could change this 1 to 2. That's not gonna hurt anything, because it's not gonna change it's not gonna change the order. But I might want to, maybe I want to move this one above this one, so I might change this to 2018. Now it's gonna run sooner. I'm not going to do that though. 2019, and this was 1, right? I think so. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind. You can always rename the migrations to put them in the right order. So if you're using the make function, don't be afraid of stopping what you're doing, creating a dependency table, and putting that migration earlier in the process. All right. Hopefully that helps that question. Because again, one of the things I hate is having tons of migrations just for small changes. Usually that's a sign that you haven't really thought through the database schema as well as you should have. And so I'm not a huge fan of that. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes you have to have extra migrations. Um, Starting off, you should have as few migrations as possible. Obviously, over time, things might change in the project and the client might want something different. So now you have to change the database schema. And so you're going to have extra migrations that are make tweaks to tables and things like that. That's going to happen, and that's okay. There's not a problem with that. But when you're first starting off, if you've got a database schema, try to think through that process so you write as few migrations from the beginning as possible. So, all right. Hopefully that answered your question, Mel. Let's see. Okay. Let me jump back over to our PR review. Now, I'm not going to do the next step that I would normally do in a PR review because we've already rejected this one. So I'm not gonna worry about that. Let's go back to the other pull requests here, and we'll look at another one from the same person. So now we've got 16 files, and this is 10 fewer, so that's good. So let's take a look at those. All right, so now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so we've got 10 files, and I can tell by looking at these that some of these are creates and some of these are changes, right? So we're probably adding a column here would be my guess, and I just know that because I'm used to looking at this. You would get used to that over time as well. I'm doing this in a particular order, so sorry, Mel. um, okay, so this is much better. If we look at these, we've got the same things. I'm not going to look at this so much because I think, if I remember correctly, I looked at these already and they were all good. All right, so let's go down here. So I've got these different creates. All right, all those look good. Let's jump down here and see what these adds are. Okay. So here we're adding a foreign ID, account ID, after ID to the balances table. So let's go back and look at the balances table again. All right. So foreign ID, transaction ID, but the accounts table was not created yet. Yeah, the accounts table is not created yet. All right. So here's what I would do on this PR. I would basically do the same thing. So I would come up here and I would say, let's try to say things differently, in each PR as much as possible. So I'll just request changes and then I'll go have that conversation. So this goes back to, again, what we were just talking about. Definitely a lot fewer. So there's some learning that has been done between the two PRs. But here I would say the biggest problem, yeah, sorry, another let's talk. The biggest problem here is, again, that order. So you don't need these two if you put these in the right order. So like, for example, if the accounts is named before the balances, then you can just add the foreign key here, right? Okay, so that's the conversation that I would have with Mel on this. So there you go. That's the best way to do it. And then I would ask them to go and update the PR based on what we discussed. All right. Now there's one more thing that I want to mention here as well. And again, we're not even testing anything yet, which we need to do. So there are some extra files still, right? Because we only had, what was it? 10? We had 10 files here, and we've got 16 files in the whole thing. So that means we've got 6 extra files that I'm not expecting in this PR review. All right. So I look here and I see welcome.php. I say, oh, that looks familiar. This is something that we did live, right? I would most likely do something like this. I would go over here and let's see, where's the comments? Where do you, oh, duh, here we go. Okay. It's the comment box, David. That's what it is. Okay. So I would just leave a comment like, this is not part of this ticket. Please remove. All right. So I would do this and start a review. And I come down here. All right. This is something that it depends on your company and whether they want something like this Docker Compose YAML file in here. A lot of companies don't want you pushing this stuff because everybody's going to use different ones. Like some people will change the name of their containers and things like that just for their own usage. But we don't want to be pushing that up necessarily. So it's possible that someone would come in here and say something like, please remove and add to Git. Is it -ignore? I don't remember. Doesn't look right. We'll just do that. All right. So I might do something like that. Please remove this and add it to the git ignore. So that way you don't have to worry about it popping up anymore. All right. Because we don't want this. Everybody's going to be doing things differently. There's no reason to clutter that. Yep. Absolutely, Mel. You were ahead of me. So we put that in git ignore, PHP unit. We don't really have any tests. I would probably just ignore this in a PR review, assuming that we will run tests in the future. Technically, it's not really part of the ticket, but I would let that one pass. These I would again comment and just be like, look, that's not part of the ticket. This was not part of the ticket. And then this one, let's see. Oops. So this one I don't think is actually being used anywhere when I looked at this PR. So looking at the welcome, I don't see it being included anywhere. And I could probably do something like this. Oops, not that. There we go. So F, there we go. So I might do something like test branch and see where I see it on the page. Only those two places. So that file's not even actually being used anywhere. So we definitely don't want to commit files that don't have a purpose or are not being used. All right. So I would probably do something like, did you mean to commit this? All right, and there may be a purpose why this was committed, and I just don't know. So this gives you an opportunity to ask them a question and see if they have a reason behind it or if it was just a mistake. So anyway, so that's some of the things that I would do. Obviously, I have the main question here. So we'll request changes, submit the review. So we've got a couple of changes here that are listed out for poor Mel, going through and making some updates here. All right, so, but again, I would start with this one and make sure that I reach out to you and actually have a conversation and say, okay, this is let's talk about these, right? Okay. Yeah, there you go. You got more work to do. Good job. And hopefully those of you who have not submitted a PR yet, hopefully you feel comfortable doing it still after going through this. All right. Go away. All right, let's look at the last PR. And again, we won't look at every PR in the future. There's only 3 of them, so I wanted to walk through this and go through this process, okay? So we found obvious things that need to be changed before really I go any further in the process with those first 2 PRs. Need some coffee. Okay, so let's look at this last one. So this last one is Ray. So let's take a look. So we've got 10 files changed. Let's see what they are. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so we've got 9. So we're pretty close to that 8. So I want to see what's going on with that. Ray's trying to game the system. All right, so the first thing that we see here is this env.example. I would probably talk to your lead before making a change like this. Um, Not because like doing it on your local .env file is fine, but pushing this up as the example, not everybody necessarily will think to change their database name. So I probably would say, hey, let's not make this update if I were the lead. But you might talk to the lead, and the lead says, yeah, that's fine, and you can leave that in this migration. So um, I'm going to leave this for now, just for sake of time. All right, so let's take a look here. We've got creates. One piece of feedback that I might put in here. So let's do this. I'm going to do, let's see, how do I say this? Update migration files to include actions such as create or add or update. All right. So, and again, this is going to be some personal preference, right? Oh, of course I'm in the way. Hang on one second. Oh, stop. Go back over here. Okay. I think I'm going to be in the way a lot. Okay. So that now you can actually see what I'm typing. So update migration file to include action such as create, add, or update. And again, is this a hard and fast rule? This is maybe something that's going to be more on the line of, more in line with like requirements or the ways that your company does things. So this might be something that is more of a company requirement than it would be like an actual normal requirement. I tend to prefer adding these into my migration files because it gives me an idea of what is happening before I open the file. Because again, GitHub doesn't give you a whole lot here. Even if I'm looking at my code, I can see very quickly this is a create, this is a create. And then I can open this up locally and kind of see more, but I can see pretty quickly what the files are doing. So if I know I'm looking for an update file, I'm going to ignore anything that starts with create. Otherwise, I've got to come in here and look, okay, what's happening with the budget? Is it creating it? Okay, it's creating it. So that just helps me visually read through things more quickly. So, uh, yeah, I mean, that's the point of this. You're all rookies, right? I'm just going to be, this is annoying. Hang on. I want you to see my lovely face, but I don't want to be in the way either. Okay. All right, so here's our review files. Okay, you can see that. Okay. So the first one here, we've got create personal access tokens. So this one is one of the original ones. I might would, was there a change made? What was changed? Oh, okay. So there was a change made. So if table has not been created, we're going to run this. So the change was adding this if statement. My guess is you were probably running into some issue locally. And so I might be like, leave a comment on this. All right, so we'll start a review. Okay, so this change is not necessary. And when we get rid of that, we're down to 9 files. So we're down to our 8 migration files. So we can go and look through here. Budget table, budget categories table, bills table. And again, I should be going back and checking the schema. I'm not going to for sake of time. Just making sure these are here. So we've got an enum. That's good. Let's see. So we got our first 4 tables, just like I was talking about before, with the first 4 tables that are dependency tables. Those are the first 4 that are there. And then the next one, we start adding our foreign IDs and foreign keys. All right. Did you change it? Oh, I got you, got you. Never mind. You didn't change it. Okay. So when I come to this, I read this, and we've got foreign ID, budget ID, references ID on the budget table. Now, excuse me. Typically, when I write these, I don't write this. And the difference with that is either an implicit or explicit declaration. So if I'm using, I tend to use implicit declarations um, because I've thought through the database, right? And if you write your database tables correctly, you should be able to, and put your columns correctly, you should be able to use implicit declarations. But if you don't do that, then you're going to run into errors. For example, if you have a column, let's say you had a budget, let's say budget table was actually something like monthly budgets table, right? And you named this column budget ID. Well, the implicit check is not going to know what table that is, and when it tries, especially if you're using constrained, when it tries to create that constrained connection, it will fail because it's not using, it can't find the table that it's supposed to connect to. So that is a case where foreign IDs or implicit foreign IDs can really bite you. But if you're using the column naming structure, matching the tables that it's connecting to, the implicit should generally be fine. I would not tell you to remove this explicit declaration. I am okay with having developers do this two different ways, as long as it works. This is one of those areas as a lead where we don't have a specific requirement as a company, and so I'm going to kind of let people do things the way that works for them. Neither of them are wrong, so this would be perfectly fine. So I would not comment on this. I would not even tell you to change it. Um, this would not even be a discussion that we would have. So most likely it would be budgets ID. Yeah, actually budget ID. You should be able to use um, the singular for the implicit Mel. So you shouldn't have to use budgets ID. It should just be budget ID. So if we go back up here, oh, this should be budgets table. That should be plural. Yeah, so that should be the budgets table. Good catch there. I did not see that. Well, I wasn't looking at all of these perfectly. Yeah, this should be budgets table. So let's make a comment. This should be budgets table. Oh. Ha! Now we've got a review. Okay. Budget categories. Categories is plural. Bills table. That's good. I mean, since we're being picky, let's be picky. Budget categories, bills, accounts. Those are all plural. Good. Budget line items, plural. Good. Monthly bills. And again, I would be fine with this, so that's not a problem. We've got the enums. That's good. Transaction table. All of these foreign IDs. Budget line items from accounts. All right, so this one, foreign ID from accounts ID. I would do singular here. And at this point, I'd stop using capitalization, apparently. So from account ID. Now on this one, you're going to need to be explicit, right? Why is that? It's because we are referencing, actually both of these here are referencing the same table. Even though they're referencing the same value, the ID, the column, they're referencing the same table as different columns. So you can't use implicit here, right? You're going to have to explicitly tell it, hey, this is what we're trying to connect to. I think, I forget, is there a way to do foreign ID explicitly in? Foreign ID 4, foreign ID. No. Okay. Yeah. So you would have to be more explicit, like Ray is in his PR right here. So this is actually the right way to do it for these two columns. Pretty much no matter what. There are some other ways that you could do it, but I prefer using the foreign ID method. Okay, so everything looks good. We've got a few tweaks, but on this one, because it's there, everything looks like it's good. We just want a couple of changes. I'm going to actually test this. So I'm going to copy this branch and go over to my code base, and I'm going to get pull. I might have to fetch first. Let's do that. Get fetch, get pull. If you know better commands, let me know. And then his branch. Could not read from remote repository. What? Hmm. Mm-mm-mm. Do, 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 do. There we go. What did I do before? Oh, I did get pull. I don't know what I'm doing. That's awesome. All right. Get checkout. That was weird. Okay. So get checkout. And now I've got his branch just for make sure it should be fine. But I'm going to do a get pull on the branch. It's up to date. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to run the migration. So let me pull this up here because all we're really testing is that the code that he wrote is good. So we're going to need to run migrations. Now, I've already run migrations for the things that I have here, if I remember correctly, this first few, right? But let's do this. Let's do get, I'm not, sorry, get PHP. Actually, I'm in sale. Sale. Let me get rid of this so you can see everything. There we go. Sale, artisan, migrate. And I'm going to add a command here that's called fresh because I want to run all of these as if I was doing the full install. Now, you wouldn't always do this, but I'm going to do this because this is a brand new repository, brand new set of migrations. I'm going to go ahead and just start fresh with my database. So fresh. All right, so sale, artisan, migrate, fresh. What? Oh, it helps if you spell artisan right. Sale, artisan, migrate, fresh. See, this is what live does. It just messes up all your coding. All right, so we're running those migrations. All of the migrations ran great. No problems. I don't see any errors. That's a good thing. Let's take a look at the database. So I'll refresh here. All of these migrations ran. That's good. Let's take a look at the tables. So we've got accounts tables, balances, bills, budget categories, doop, and that one. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So all 8 of our tables are there. So everything in this PR ran. It worked. So that's good. So what I would typically do is I would come back here and I would finish my review. And then in here I would add, once these have been fixed, let's see, I do once all comments have been updated, this is good to go. All right, so I'm leaving a message in here basically for him and for me to let me know, hey, when he gets done making the changes that I've asked for, I've already tested everything else and it's ready to go. All right, so I will finish that review. I will still do request changes. Now, sometimes if there's just like one change and it's a very simple change, like renaming something or something like that, I will still approve it, but leave a comment and ask them to change that before we merge it in. That way it's already approved. But in this case, I will do request changes. Now, sometimes depending on the settings of your Git repository, you can if you approve it and then changes are made, the approval it gets removed. That's really annoying. But there's good reasons behind that, especially if it's a lot of changes. Um, but that's typically how I'll go about it. All right, so we've got three PRs. One of them's probably going to get deleted, and then the other two, we've got two PRs that have some information on them, and so then typically what I would do is let's go over here to the ticket. If this was assigned to them, I would I would have had them move this to in review, right? So when you get your ticket, as soon as you're done working on it, move it to in review, so that way I know it's ready. Now, obviously, community tickets, leave those alone because everybody has the opportunity to make a PR for that one. So it's good that nobody moved this. But if you have one assigned to you specifically, move that over. But then what I would probably do, and I've not created this yet, is I would probably move your ticket back. Let's create a new column. So let's make a new column. We'll call this rework. And we'll give it an orange. This is for tickets that need to be updated, that have PRs that need to be updated. All right. So we're going to put this rework column. Yeah, we'll leave it there. No, not there. We want to put it here. Yeah, that's fine. All right. So typically what will happen is if it's over here in review and I look at it and I review it and I need to send it back, then I will put this here. If the PR has been approved, once it is merged, then I would move the ticket to done. Only after it's merged. All right. Maybe we'll create a column for approved PRs. I don't know. I don't want to get too many columns in here. But I think having a rework column is helpful so that you can see when somebody puts your tickets back and there's issue. Obviously, you're going to get an email. You're going to be notified if there's comments on the PR. But this is just another way for us to kind of track from a total standpoint where different tickets are in the process. Okay. Let's see here. Debenture Dave. I think the backlog page is giving a 404 on my end. Is it the link you posted in Discord channel? The backlog. I'm not sure what you mean. Can you post the link? Because I'm not 100% on what you mean by the backlog page. Unless clicking on this. Unless you're talking about this. I don't know. Let me know what you mean, CW. Give me a link if you can. This page here? Weird. If you go to the project, then you should be able to go to projects and then the DeepPockets project, and that will take you to the board. So it's the DeepPockets project. So DeepPockets, and then projects, and then here. Unless you guys don't have access for some reason. I'll look into it, guys, because I wonder if it's something that I need to fix from an access standpoint. I apologize if that's the case. I wasn't getting it. Yeah, okay, it's probably an access issue. I'll take a look at that today and see if I can get that fixed. I might post something and let you guys know that I think it's available in the Discord channel. So once I do that, just let me know if you're able to see it after I look into it. That's annoying. Sorry about that, guys. I thought for sure you should have access to this, especially if you're a collaborator. But maybe not. Okay. I'll look into that. Sorry about that. I wasn't understanding why it was 404 for you, but access makes sense. All right, so that's the basic review process. We're gonna that I'm going to do moving forward on those. Again, not all of them will be done on the live stream. I might do some PR reviews, just going through the code throughout the week, things like that. But that's typically how you want to do the PR. You want to pull the PR down. You want to look at the code first, see if there's anything obvious. And then you want to pull it down and actually test it. Now, in this case, all we're doing is running migrations, right? Well, in the future, we'll probably be running actual tests. So we'll run unit tests. In the future, we'll run seeders. So that's the next thing we'll talk about next week. So we've gone an hour and a half so far just on the project. So if you have not had a chance to work on this, you've got another week. Obviously, you can create PRs further down the road for these things as well. So again, if you're coming into this late in the process, feel free to still do this work just for the practice. But I probably won't review that PR. So we might do some more PR reviews next week. But next week for sure, if there are any, maybe we'll approve one. How's that? But for sure, we will talk about kind of the next step here, which would be seeding the database, because some of these tables we want to have information readily available to us as the user from the beginning, and we might want to have some stuff that's available to us from a testing standpoint. So we're going to talk about that stuff next week in the first hour and a half. More than likely, we tend to go longer and longer the deeper we get into this project, which that's great. If we don't have as much time for QA, maybe we'll come up with some other live stream QA times. But really, the goal is for this to be helpful. So hopefully this is helpful to you. Hopefully you learned something in this process, and hopefully you take this process and use it and interact with one another. Here's my thing. If you create a PR, put in the title of the PR if you want me to review it. All right. So let's say you create a PR. In the title, just put something like DMD in parentheses or something like that. And that lets me know if you want me to review it either personally or live. If you're open to anyone reviewing it, put any or anyone or something like that in parentheses so that I may still review it, but that way others can have the opportunity to practice PR reviews, to give feedback, things like that. I think you guys typically would do that anyway, but that way we can, I want you to be able to create a PR without getting bombarded by people. So put in parentheses any or anyone or something like that so that people know if you want them to review it as well. I would encourage you to do that. I would encourage you to get feedback from other people. It creates discussion and allows other people to learn along the way. Maybe you do something that they haven't seen before, and so they just ask a question about it, whereas they might not in another instance. So certainly feel free. We've got another week here before we're really diving into the kind of the next piece. So if you want to spend more time working on PRs, if you guys want to correct those PRs, we're only going to take one. But if you guys want to correct those PRs just for practice and making sure that we kind of go through that process, that would be a good thing for next week. But yeah, so I think that's everything that we're going to try to cover for the DeepPockets project specifically here. We've gone right about an hour and a half on that. So next week we will talk about seeding the database, which is always an interesting endeavor, and then we'll move on from there. So again, the project's going to take a while, right? It's okay. We will get to a place where you'll start writing code and have your own tickets, but I want people to get used to what we're actually building here along the way. So that's the project. So let's open it up for general Q&A. Of course, QA, you can ask anything about the project or anything about anything else, and I will be honest with you and tell you I have no clue. If it's something that I don't know about, or I'll give you my opinion if I have an opinion about it, if I have an idea that I think would be helpful for you. So feel free to leave questions down in the bottom of the, not in the bottom, but in the chat. It's the bottom for me. Leave questions down in the chat if you want me to cover anything specifically. So let's see. Mel says, should I take down my first PR and correct the better one? I would, just so you don't, for your own sake, not having multiple PRs up there. It's just easier. It's easier visually to not have extra stuff in that list for you and others. So yeah, I would just remove that first one since it's got a lot more issues, and then go ahead and take a look at the second one and update that one moving forward. So. My coffee is cold. Not intentionally. I might have to go put it in the microwave. That's strictly for Mel. Don't microwave it. Oh, that's awesome. All right. DevMentor Dave Ray says, DevMentor Dave, yes, I'll take Mean's comment as honest criticism. Into Django, an env file is a requirement. I'm new to Laravel, so is an env file not a requirement? It is a requirement. Typically, we don't store those in the repository though, because typically you'll have an environment file, for each of your environments, right? So you could do that through naming conventions. I'm not a huge fan of that. I would rather just have a .env in each of your different environments. So the example is there really more to help you create your local .env file. So I don't want to necessarily update the example if it's not something that's necessary for the project. If it's more of a personal change, then you don't want to update the env.example file. That's the one that was updated that we were looking at. So what you want to do is make sure you have those updates in the .env file. That should already be ignored by the repository. So that's what we want to do. But yeah, you definitely need a .env file for the project. So that's normal. Ming says, is there anything wrong with confirming that you're a self-taught dev at interviews when they ask you? I'm always wary of saying I'm from a boot camp as they don't like to hire people that are juniors. Oh, sorry. So there's a couple things with that. I think for me, the only reason why I would be sensitive to that is if that is something that is not common. Here in the United States, lots and lots and lots of devs are self-taught, or they've gone through boot camps or things like that. So it's very common in the industry here for us to have devs with that experience. In fact, in my opinion, most of the best devs I've worked with, not all of them, but most of the best devs I've worked with were self-taught. And so I think there's reasons for that, such as they tend to be self-taught people, tend to be people who learn things on their own well, who are self-motivated, things like that, right? So I would say it's not necessarily a bad thing that you have to hide, but it depends on your environment. So if that's looked down upon, then maybe I wouldn't bring it up unless asked. But in my situation, it's something that I pretty regularly would, especially early on, I would regularly state, because to me, it was a sort of a place of pride, maybe. But it spoke to my own perseverance in learning and growing. So I would say for the most part, I wouldn't make a big deal about it, but I would at least make it clear that I'm self-taught, because if I've done some cool things and they see that I'm self-taught, that tells them that I'm good at learning on my own. I'm not going to need somebody holding my hand all the time. And yet if the environment's not good for that, then, downplay it if you need to. So it's really more of an environment thing than should you or should you, as far as the should you or should you not standpoint. It sounds like maybe that would not be the way to go for you, but it also depends on who you're talking to. If you're talking, for example, if you're trying to get a job with a U.S. company, being self-taught is more acceptable, right, than maybe in your current situation. So Ray says if learning at a boot camp's looked down on, yeah, some of us have no hope. Absolutely. We Yeah, and thankfully I have not seen that in the United States um, industry. In fact, a lot of interviewers will view that as a better thing here at least. But yeah, otherwise we'd be in trouble. I would not be doing what I'm doing today if and frankly, I didn't go to a boot camp. It was completely, when I say self taught, I mean really self taught. Like I had to. It was a lot of documentation reading. YouTube was not a. It was around, I think, but it wasn't as big as it is now with tutorials and things like that. So I was really self taught. Yeah, Ian says if being self taught is going to be held against you, that place might not be the best place for you. They might be a little too stiff. The only difference there, Ian, is I forget. I forget where Ming's from. I apologize. I could guess, but I don't want to be wrong. But I think it's more of a cultural thing there. So it's not necessarily a specific company issue, would be my guess. Oh, you're from the UK. I don't know why I thought you were. For some reason, Singapore was stuck in my mind. I don't know why. See, I'm not that good, Ian. I don't remember. Who was it? Richard O'Neill. I don't remember everybody. Yeah. So in the UK, yeah, I don't know that that should be a concern. Um, they should be much more open to that. So to Ian's point, I think that's something that you probably want to stay away from as far as an employer. Yeah, that's true, Mel. Even if you're self-taught initially, that doesn't mean you can't learn and grow and even get a degree later on if you want to. Sometimes that might be a helpful. It might be. I've never had to, but it might be good in some instances to go out and get a certificate for certain things, or certification is what I was going for there, for certain things. So if you want to go in a specific direction that they really require certifications uh, for getting a position, then that might be something you look into down the road. So yeah, a lot of it depends on what you're trying to do, where you're at globally and socially. Um, but yeah, in the UK, I don't think that should be an issue. Old dogs, new tricks. Absolutely right. CW says, is it okay if existing devs are self-taught but changing to a new tech stack? Yeah, I don't know why it wouldn't be. um, I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, I have probably every job I've been in had some sort of new stack or some sort of new language or framework or something like that that I've had to learn. Um, I don't see any problem with that. I don't know what the problem would be with that. Um, yeah. So I don't know if maybe I'm misunderstanding the question, CW. Let me know. But I don't. Yeah, I think honestly, I think self-taught devs are probably going to be better at picking up new tech stacks than sometimes others. In fact, I have worked with. I won't tell you what type of developers they were because I don't want to be mean. But I have worked with certain types of developers who learned a certain uh, framework and language. Um, they were not willing to learn anything new. Now they would learn anything new within that framework and language. And honestly, I just kind of assumed that this is the way all of them were. It's not. I've thankfully been able to interact with others who are in their in their realm of development, who are just better people. But I thought every developer that is in this realm was like this, because every single one that I came across had the same attitude towards learning anything outside of that framework, outside of that language. Um, and so I just assumed that they were all mostly useless, to be honest with you. But most of the self-taught devs, most of the open source devs, they were the ones that were pretty much eager to learn just about anything, including that other framework and language. So that's why, again, just a lot of this is my experience. It's anecdotal evidence, but that's why I just feel like most of the time, self-taught devs or devs who have gone through something that takes more than just schoolroom learning, um, they tend to be better. They tend to adapt better. They tend to, um, yeah, they tend to just kind of uh, want to learn more. So it tends to work out for them better, from what I've seen. Um, like an existing .NET dev, self-taught Laravel, jumping into Laravel. Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. At the end of the day, a senior developer is somebody who, either by necessity or by desire, is constantly learning new things. Um, being a senior level developer doesn't mean you stop learning. So I think it's and when you get to that point, it's going to be self taught, unless you just, I don't know. I don't even know, unless you're just really into specific like degrees. I don't know. Can you get a master's in Laravel? I don't think you can. But at some point, as a senior developer, you're going to be continuing your own education and self teaching, teaching yourself, right? And so you have to become a self taught dev. And so that's why I think the question is kind of moot, because everyone needs to be able to do that. You need to build that skill set and be able to teach yourself and learn on your own, if you're going to consider yourself as a mid or senior level developer. To me, that's the biggest difference between a junior level developer and a mid or senior level developer, is the junior still needs a good amount of instruction, whereas the mid or senior can find the instruction on their own and can motivate themselves and direct themselves in the learning process. So let's see. Lots of conversation going on here. Remember, if you leave a comment for me, do at DevMentorDave or question marks or something, so I can recognize it, because you guys are chatting. Let's see. Ming says, what makes a CS grad stand out compared to someone without a CS degree? From my understanding, they tend to have an advantage, as they have qualifications plus an internship, compared to somebody who just has projects. Um, that's a hard question, because I've never been an interviewer that put a priority there. Um, to me, it's always been like, I don't really care so much what your resume is. I want to know what you're doing now and what you're pursuing now and what you've done, how you can talk about what you've done in the past. Um, some companies might be dealing with things that just require a certain type of instruction and knowledge. So that's the only thing that I can think of. If you're working with a company that's, let's see, for example, you've got a company here in America that's, an accounting firm, right? So they might want somebody who has a degree that includes, um, I don't even know what it would be, something that would help them understand the accounting world better and faster. Um, so I don't know. Other than that, I don't know that anybody should be caring what the difference is. To me, the difference is, can you do the job? And if you can't do the job, well, you need to go practice more, learn more, make yourself better so that you can do the job. Um, so it's hard for me to kind of come from that perspective of wanting somebody with a degree more than somebody without a degree. Um, so I apologize for not having a great answer for that, Ming. Ian says a friend of mine at Oracle told me that it's full of PhDs that can't write "Hello World." Yeah, and so that's the thing. That's why again for me as an interviewer, I want to hear you talk about what you've done. I want to hear you talk about um, problems that you've had. I want to hear you talk about how you overcame those problems, what you went through to go through the documentation or find the solution or what the solution was, and things like that. I want to hear you talk about your experience. I want to hear you explain why you are where you are, why you are where you are right now as a developer, and usually from that I can tell if you are the type of person that's going to fit in with our team. Um, Now, looking at code is good. It's helpful. But especially for us, the company I work for only hires senior level devs. Um, so typically, um, so we don't have like a mentoring process or anything like that. So we don't hire entry level or junior level devs. So we want to make sure that the person can discuss what they've done, and so a code review is less important for us at that point than it is um, your ability to talk about and understand what you have done. And I think that's even good for junior developers. I think people will care less about the code that you've written if you can talk about the code that you've written, if you can talk about the struggles that you've dealt with and the things that you've overcome, and the cool stuff that you've built on your own, and why you built it, and what makes it a good example of you and what you've done. So, um, I don't know. Hopefully that helps answer that question. Um, yeah, connections are good. Learning in a classroom environment can build connections. Um, Only if you keep those connections up, though. So I don't think most of the people in the classes that I've taught are still connected. Um, of course, that was also during COVID, so um, it was remote, so that makes it harder. Maybe in person, you kind of keep those connections a little bit more, but I would say most people probably don't keep those connections as much from, except for maybe to the teacher, especially if they're a professional. So that might be a connection that you'd want to connect with, especially on LinkedIn or something like that. Ray says this shirt makes my skin look better. Well, actually, I've been out in the sun a little bit more than I typically am, so maybe it's a combination. I don't know. It's been fairly nice here in Kansas City, and so I've been out several times actually. Now my backyard is pretty shady, so that's why. But I'm sure I get a little bit of sun with that, so that's probably part of it more than the shirt color. I don't know because I haven't tweaked anything. So, but thank you for the compliment. Uh, See, I know how to make connections. That's awesome. uh, yeah, CW, degrees and certifications tend to be more of a larger company. I think part of that's because a larger company is large, it has to have a way of filtering people out, and I think that's where a lot of that comes down to. Whereas a smaller company probably is not going to get as many applications, and so they don't have to deal with as many filters. I know when we've hired at my company, we're a pretty small company. Um, we got a lot of interviews for us, but it wasn't that many. When you look at all the ones that are out there for bigger companies and things like that. So that I think it does become a way of filtering out more than it should, but it's probably more of a pragmatic thing for companies. So that makes sense. Let's see. Ray says I've built video games. Yeah. Um, well, there's a whole video game market. I think you're actually doing some work in it right now, but but yeah, that can be a little bit difficult. I will say, if most of your experience is, for example, in the game development world, and you're trying to get in more of the application development world, um, obviously there's similarities from a programming standpoint, but not so much from a this is what I've done standpoint. So, but I think you can still leverage experience in the past to discuss how you go about handling problems and issues and learning. Um, so I don't. I am of the opinion that all experience is good experience because it gives you something else to draw on in the future. You never know what type of application you end up building. It might end up being a browser game, for some big company or something like that, and you've got game building experience. It may not be in Unity, but it's you have an understanding of that model, that concept that others, such as myself, would not. And so that could make you an asset for a particular company down the road. Yeah, and the fact, Ray, that I have no clue what you're talking about proves your point that that will separate the men from the boys as far as dealing with latency and network between NPCs. I know what NPCs and players are, but I have no idea what you're talking about or the issue you're trying to solve. So that's true. That's true, Mel. Even Netflix has games on it now. So hey, you never know. You never know what's going to open up. That's awesome. All right. Got about what time is it? 8 minutes or so left before we jump off. So, any other questions you have, throw them out there. Here's a good one. Why do some companies not have technical tests, but they have a technical discussion about your skill set and experience, or a demo project you build and talk about it? Lots of reasons. Sometimes companies use tests because they don't have uh, somebody on staff in an interview capacity to be able to ask the right questions. And so they have to lean on some sort of third party tool to give them insight into where you're at. Um, so I'm not a huge fan of technical questions in interviews. I think it's largely a waste of time unless you have specific things, like, say, again, like an accounting firm. Let's say H&R Block. That's a local company here in the Kansas City area, and there's developers that work for H&R Block building the application that we use to submit our tax refunds uh, or tax whatever it's called. So the developers at H&R Block, probably most of them don't necessarily need to understand accounting or need to understand even the law, but I would assume there's some in positions that need to understand those things better than others. And so, depending on the position you're hiring for, you may need to ask technical questions to make sure that they are going to be a good fit right away to be able to jump into what you're doing. Especially if you're hiring in like a leadership role. If you're hiring somebody outside the company to come in and be a lead, you're going to want to make sure that they understand if they're going to be doing PR reviews. You want to understand how they look at PR, so you might get more technical on that front than maybe you would on a tax return. Yes, thank you. Then maybe you would on the coding side of things, right? So I think generally it comes down to, do they have somebody on staff that can ask um, the right kinds of questions? If not, a lot of times you'll end up with tests, or they're just trying to weed out people that they value a certain thing more than maybe I would value it, and so they lean on those tests to help them determine if this person has that value. Um, Again, I'm not a fan of technical questions in the interview, but honestly, I have I have interviewed with companies where I've had 10 plus years of experience, and the developers acted like I had no clue what I was doing. And believe it or not, I did not get a job there and didn't want to work there. There are just some people who are very stuck on themselves. And so they like to ask hard technical questions to a lot of times kind of make you feel inferior, um, and to make themselves look better in their own eyes. I would say most companies that are using that are probably trying to just streamline their process, um, because they're either missing something in their process, or they feel inadequate in some way, or they're just trying to find something to help them separate candidates out. I think that's another important thing to think about and remember in this process is we're in a day and age where we have a lot of people going through basically the same training, and they're all doing the same types of projects. They're all getting the same information, and so you've got a lot of people with the same experience and similar projects. How do you differentiate between them? And so I think that has just become a tool, a way for companies to be able to try to differentiate. I don't know that it's the best way. Um, I've had I've had interviewers on a phone call ask me to describe how I would lay out a database table or a series of tables given certain parameters. That's crazy. Um, what's interesting is I actually did end up getting that job. Actually, I did get a an offer. I don't think I took that job. But yeah, it was kind of funny. So it just doesn't make any sense because that's not how we work. And for me, that's the problem. When we create these odd ways of evaluating people, it takes them outside of the real world of how we work. And so now you're evaluating somebody on a process that isn't real, process that isn't part of what you would do every day. So you're going to get a false positive or potentially a false negative. And so I'm not a huge fan of those things. I would rather hire somebody and find out, they're not a good fit or they can't really do the job, um, than I would, miss out on somebody because I had to come up with some other way of trying to evaluate them. Um, so yeah, there's lots of reasons. Um, there's lots of reasons there as to why companies would do that. I forget. Sorry, I forget who was asking that question. Um, yeah. Oh, Ming was asking that question. So, hopefully that helps at least understand where they're coming from. It maybe doesn't fix the process for you having to go through that, but it could be that I think in many ways it's companies that um, don't know how to evaluate, especially sometimes like recruiting companies will have you take tests because they don't know. They get these recruiters sometimes that don't have any idea about technical side of things, and so they don't have any way of evaluating where you're at to be able to know if you're a good candidate to put forward to a company. So sometimes they'll give you tests that you need to take, things like that. So yeah, it's a weird world. I'll be honest with you. I don't like the way most people do interviews, but then I'm not at their companies either, so I don't know what their struggles are. So I want to be careful to not say that they're wrong. I just don't. I don't find the value that they might find in it. Let's see. Video suggestion: red flags on interviews. Why it is not always the candidate's fault. uh, Absolutely. So yeah, there there are videos. I have a whole list of videos that I still need to make. I only got one out last week, which made me a little mad. Um, I'm gonna try to get more, at least two out next week. So I've got lots of ideas, and that definitely falls into some of the categories of videos that I've got coming up. But I might steal your suggestion though. Thank you. uh, they have an AI medical robot attached to the chip. Ooh, ugh, I'm sorry, I can't do chips. Ugh. I don't want anybody implanting anything in me at any time, unless it's necessary for survival. And even then, I don't know. I don't know. That's kind of gives me the willies. I don't want anybody having any way of controlling me artificially. Let's see. Ming says it doesn't make sense for recruiters to ask technical questions for the CTO. Um, I know I'm the right fit for the company. I had the exact tech stack that they needed. Yeah. Um, I'll be honest with you, Ming. There are a lot of CTOs out there that are not technical. Um, they get put in that position not wrongly necessarily, but they get put in that position oftentimes for their management skills, um, and for their ability to interact with developers and communicate with developers, um, or technical people. So I get what you're saying. You know, the CTO should be able to do that interview, but honestly, a lot of them are not really qualified, and so they need a recruiter to do that, or they need their devs. Really, it should be the people that you're gonna, in my opinion. Let me, my opinion. In my opinion, it should be the people interviewing you should be the people that you would most likely work with, um, and or work under, report to. And the reason for that is because generally, when you're bringing somebody in, you're not just bringing somebody in that has a technical skill. You're bringing somebody in that's going to be a part of a team. And you need to be able to assess, hey, is this somebody that seems like I can get along with? You know, can I build a rapport with them even here in this interview? Um, that's a huge thing when it comes to building a team. It's not just about technical skill, it's about the ability to interact with each other. Um, and so I always recommend that we have somebody that's going to be directly involved in in that person's job in some way, whether it's a lead or a fellow developer or a director or something like that, or even the CTO if it's a small company, right? But whoever's interviewing needs to obviously not only be technically literate, but also needs to be somebody who's going to be able to get a feel as to whether they can work with that person. And a lot of times, especially in big corporations, you just have people who interview. I interviewed at a company once here in Kansas City that's a larger marketing firm, and I actually ended up working there as a contractor. But they just kind of had random leads go in and interview people, and it was just kind of part of their job. Like they would rotate, right? And so the people that interviewed me were not the people who I worked with. And thankfully, I'm a pretty easygoing person, so it worked out pretty well. But you know, not everybody has the same attitude. Not everybody has the same way of interacting with people, and so there can be conflicts that are not necessarily intended. Uh, on a team, and you can kind of catch a lot of that ahead of time if you know what team you're hiring for. Now, sometimes, oh, excuse me, sometimes you don't know what you're hiring for. You're just hiring because you have a need. That's not a good thing, in my opinion, but sometimes it happens. But I would rather have somebody interviewing that's going to be actively involved with them. So let's see. Ray says, "I don't want anybody knowing what I think. It ain't pretty." Yeah, exactly. I don't need people reading the the yeah, electric signals going on in my brain, um, for sure. Yeah, that's true, Ian. CTOs may also not have a lot of time, depending on the size of the company and their duties. They just may not have time to be a part of that process. Um, and again, a lot of them are just so, a lot of them just are not technical enough. Um, so that's just reality. Uh, CW says, yeah, culture fit is so misunderstood. Yeah, I see a lot of these memes out there about culture. It's like pictures of a pool table or something like that. I worked at a company once that had a pool table. Um, it rarely got used because we were all too busy working. Um, it also had they had like Fridays were like they had beers and stuff and all that stuff, which I don't usually drink, so it wasn't a big deal to me. But it's interesting. Companies that try to force a specific culture, see, I think you kind of develop the culture as you go, and culture is hard to change unless there's something bad about the culture. Um, I don't think you should be striving for a specific culture. Unless it is a toxic one, then I don't know that you necessarily need to find changes to it. You just need to lean into it and be who you are to some degree from a culture standpoint. Uh, yeah, Ming says I find it frustrating when you go through so many layers with the recruiter, then meet the dev team because something could get miscommunicated along the process with the recruiter. Yeah, and that is tough. This is one of the reasons why I am a fan of recruiters, especially external recruiters, because they have been the main source of my jobs uh, throughout the years. I've only had two jobs. Yeah, I've only had two jobs, I think, out of the many that I've had, where I got them without using an external recruiter. Um, so I definitely don't want to say anything bad about recruiters because I think they do a pretty good job most of the time, at least the ones that I've worked with. Um, but it is a point of failure in the process for sure that could happen. Um, that's also why I'm not a fan of multiple levels. Like it's one thing for me to talk to a recruiter one on one so that they get to know me and then they look at what jobs are available to see what I might be a good fit for. Um, but once you get to that job and you're start talking to the devs, if you've got more than one interview, we typically do two. One is just a quick phone screen. It's about 15 minutes or so. Um, and that's more just to kind of get a high level idea if this feels like a person that we'd want to interview. And then we have one interview typically, and that's because we generally know what we're looking for. We know what the questions that we want to ask. We know how to interact with them generally. So we have a good process. A lot of companies have multiple steps in their process. A lot of it has to do with the availability of people. In my opinion, if you can't get the right people in one meeting, you should change the time or change your process. Um, the people who are making the decisions about a hire should be able to do that in one sitting, in my opinion. So I don't know. I'm trying not to get real strongly opinionated because we're after time, and I could probably talk about that for a long time. Uh, let's see. Who dares touch the pool table when it's by the boss's office? It's actually it was way in the sort of the front. Actually, it was by the back entrance. Really, well, one of them. There were two back entrances. Um, but it was way back in the back. But you could still hear it. Like usually it'd be like a Friday or something like that. Somebody would go back there and play, and so you're there typing, and all of a sudden you hear this like clack of the pool balls. It was not very conducive to working. I'll put it that way. If somebody was actually playing it. Yeah, exactly. Challenge the boss. Um, well, in my instance, the boss was almost never there. So yeah, whatever. Dev Mentor Dave, can you give us a few more details on the whole culture thing? Personally, I don't have to like someone to work with them. I don't care what they say or think, but what they do. Yeah, so what I mean by culture is how people are perceiving being uh, interacted with. So you can have a culture where it's still a good culture, but there isn't, you just don't have a lot of people, at the water cooler, right? So some people would look at a company and say, man, nobody ever talks to anybody. This is a horrible culture. Well, it could be that the people that they attract are people that are more introverted and they're nice. They happily have a conversation if necessary, but they don't seek that out. And so one person might walk into that company and look at that and be like, "Man, this is a horrible culture," because it's just in their mind it's just dead because it's not what they would do. Some people would walk into a culture where you've got all kinds of conversations happening. They would look at that and they would say, that is a great culture. There's communication, there's camaraderie, there's things like that. Other people would look at that and be like, there's no way I could work here. It would be too loud and too many things going on. Um, and so that would not be a good culture fit for them. Does that mean that culture is bad? No, it just means that that's not a great fit for you and the type of things that you do. You might be somebody like, for example, I feel like I can flourish in any environment because I'm awesome. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm pretty laid back, and I can have conversations. If somebody wants to have conversations, I can sit there and do my work. If nobody wants to talk, I'm pretty flexible. I think the correct term is like ambivert or something like that. I'm happy to engage. I'm happy to not engage, um, and I'm not worried if I'm in an environment with less engagement. I'm not worried about what people think of me. Some people would. Some people couldn't take that first environment. They'd wonder if anybody thought they were doing well. Um, so I think there's a lot of things that go into culture that don't necessarily make it good or bad. It just makes it what it is. And you want to find a culture that you think you will fit in with, um, because that's going to make it easier. If you're in an environment where you're uncomfortable, part of it may be that you need to learn and grow, right? So we don't want to set that aside. Maybe you need to learn and grow, but part of it may be that it's just not a great culture fit for you. Um, Culture is not about amenities. Culture is about comfort, in my opinion. It's not about the things that the company gives you or the freedoms that you have. It's about how do I feel being a part of this group of people. That's what I think of when I think of culture, especially from specifically when I think of culture from a company standpoint. Um, and honestly, in a company, there could be multiple cultures, right? You may have one type of culture in the dev area, but over in accounting, it's a little bit different culture, right? So maybe in accounting, it's nobody talks to anybody, and they're all okay with that because they're a bunch of number nerds, and that's fine, and they like that. But over in the dev department, you've got some more gregarious people, and they like to have open discussions about things and stuff like that. It's a little bit more free form in conversation and noise, So in a company, you could have multiple cultures. That's fine. I think we need to recognize that, and that the culture that we're most concerned about is the one that we're specifically in or going to be in. This idea of a complete company culture, I think there are good um, goals, for companies to pursue internally with their people, but I wouldn't necessarily say that having one main culture for an entire organization is healthy or realistic, in my opinion. That's again just my opinion. Yeah, the boss plays pool while everybody else tries to work through the noise. That's funny. Um, we don't go over to the water cooler. Those number nerds will start talking math. We have our pool table. That's awesome. Yeah. So anyway, that's my thoughts on company culture. Maybe I should do a video on it or scrape it from this one. I don't know. We'll see. I do apologize. I need to get back and put some timestamps on some more of these live streams. I know I haven't done that recently, so I'll try to get that done. Um, I will take care of the issue if I can. I assume I can for the project board so that you guys have access to that moving forward, and I'll let you know when that's ready. Um, is there anything else that I promised? I don't remember. I didn't write down. Hopefully not. Yeah, take a look at those PR reviews, Mel and Ray. And if you want to put up another review, somebody else does, go ahead and do that. We may not review it live, but I'll try to review it throughout the week too, just to give you some feedback. You should be able to do it perfectly though, if you've seen what we did so far. No, I'm just kidding. But that's one thing about PR reviews. They give us good opportunity to learn as a group too. So that's why I want to do some of them publicly as well. So we'll do more of those if they're available for next week. And then next week we'll talk about seeding the database. Hopefully it'll be a little bit shorter since we've been going longer on the project. I think we'll try to keep that a little bit shorter. So we'll hopefully have a little bit longer Q&A time next week. So if you have questions, run into things that you want to talk about, bring them to the live stream. So Ray, now that the live stream is over, do you want me to change to the implicit foreign keys? No. I would not. I don't know whose PR we're going to merge in. But typically if I were reviewing that, I would ignore them because they're perfectly fine. And unless we had a standard as a company, which we don't, and we meaning here in the Dev Mentor Dave channel, right? So unless we had a standard that required it, I would not have you change it just because it's not the way that I would do it, right? And that's something to keep in mind when we're doing PR reviews. If you see something in the code that isn't the way that you would do it, but it still works and it does it, I would offer suggestion offline to the person or say, hey, this is how I would have gone about that. Just FYI, but I would still approve the PR. And the reason for that, is nobody's going to ever write perfect code. At some point, it will probably need to be revised anyway. As long as it's not bad code, as long as it's not unfunctional code, if that's a word, misfunctional code, I don't know. As long as it works, then there's no reason to needlessly make people keep redoing things. If what they've done works, I typically let it go. And that's the importance of actually pulling things down and testing it to make sure that it actually does work. So no, I would not worry about moving to the implicit foreign keys. I think that's perfectly fine. Yours may not be the one that we merge in, or it might. So I don't know. Excuse me. Lack of sleep. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about it, but I would go back and change those other things that we talked about in the PR. So anyway, have a great day, guys. Thank you for jumping on here. I will see you all next week. Oh, my wife just brought me some freshly baked sourdough bread. That is awesome. All right. Yeah, have a good weekend. I will see you all next week. Again, I'm going to try to get a couple of videos out next week. Some of them are burning a hole in my notes. So I need to get them out to you guys. So I will try to get those out, and then I'll see you next week. Again, next week, I think the content will be less, so we'll probably have more Q&A time, especially since we lost a lot of Q&A time today going over that. But have a good weekend, and I will talk to you all later.